Before I begin, can I just get a show of hands how many clerics there are in the room? None? That's a little strange when it's what we all spent 13 years studying. Let me introduce myself. I'm Kerry, and just like all of you, I study to be a cleric. If we look at the history of education, we can see that a lot of it came from emerging Protestant religions. And Martin Luther declared that salvation depends on a person's own reading of the scriptures. Children were taught specifically to read so they could read scriptures. And by the end of the 17th century, school was made compulsory. Children had to go to school, and a lot of these schools were run by the church. As education evolved, and during the time of the Industrial Revolution, children were educated so they could work in factories. Employers saw this as a way to create better workers. Things that were valued during this time were discipline, punctuality, a high tolerance for long hours of tedious work, and following directions. This is completely different to schooling today. Not much changed for centuries in our approach to teaching. But in the last 8 years that I've been teaching, there have been huge and fundamental changes. So I work at a school, Mount Scopus, that has 3 campuses, 1,500 students, and over 1,000 iPads. This morning I'm going to do 2 things. I'll talk to you about what it's like to be a 5-year-old at school today, and then in doing so, I'm going to make you feel really old. Compared to today's kids, what we did at school may as well have been horse and buggy maintenance. I love my job. I love watching the little faces as they come in the morning and as they discover something new. I love seeing the wealth of knowledge they leave with at the end of the year and their development. It's exhausting, and there are days that I just don't want to hear my name being called anymore, but I still love my job. There are those that say I love it so much I take it home with me, and I'm often told by family members to stop talking to them like they're one of my kids. And it's a fair enough request when my kids are 5 and 6 years old. But when you're talking to children of that age from 8:30 to 3:30, it's hard to not carry that over into home life too. So over the last 20 years, there have been huge changes. There are still things that children need to learn, like how to read, how to write, how to count. So there's a curriculum that needs to be followed, but our approach has changed completely. Education has evolved into a practice of learning together, and the students take the teacher on a journey just as much as the teacher takes the students on one. A lot of educators think that there are 3 teachers in the room. There's the teacher, the students, and then the learning space. If you had to walk into my classroom, it'd be pretty hard to find the front of the room. There's no desk with where I should be sitting. On more than one occasion, people have come in to look for me, and I'm usually down on the ground working with the children, and being quite small, I tend to blend in with them. So it's hard to see where I am. Unlike in the past, where punctuality, discipline, and following directions were what was considered important, today we value thinking, questioning, exploring, and investigating. Children today take ownership of their learning, and they influence the teacher on the route the class will take. So the school that I work at is part of the International Baccalaureate program. Basically, this means when teaching our kids, we start with a really broad transdisciplinary theme. So for example, at the moment, we're looking into where we are in place at time, and then we narrow that down. So we've gone into looking at that life today is different to how it was in the past. The children decide how they want to investigate this, and across the 2 lower primary campuses, they're going different routes. Our campus is looking at the way that toys and games have changed over time, and the other campus is looking at the way that transport has changed over time. When investigating these things, of course, kids still use books and do home surveys and ask their parents questions, but they also use things like YouTube and Wikipedia. Technology plays a huge role in their research. Again, so different to our schooling. The teacher would stand at the front of the class and she would teach you everything that she thought you should know. You never questioned what you were taught, and you never told the teacher what you thought you should be learning. You would never suggest toys and games if somebody else was doing transport. Everyone did the same thing. In more recent times, these changes have been accelerated by the use of technology. So technology allows students to have joint learning programs with kids across campuses or even around the whole world. It prepares them for the big wide world outside of school. We have kids as young as 6 making online presentations and high school students having online learning lectures just like they would at university. When kids have access to so much technology, education gets pretty exciting and interesting. We're going to have a look at some of the things that, the amazing projects that are happening within my school with my children to see how exciting it is. So in my class, we're involved in regular FaceTime sessions with the children at the other campus. This ties into our literacy curriculum because it gives the kids hands-on experience with their speaking and listening skills that they're being taught. At the moment, they're still whole group sessions, like you can see up there. We need to teach our kids about FaceTime etiquette. And you might be wondering what FaceTime etiquette is. Basically, the children need to learn that only one person talks at a time. So if somebody on the other side of the screen is talking, they need to wait their turn. Or if somebody else on their side of the screen is talking, again, they need to wait their turn. They also get pretty excited by seeing their friends across the campuses, and they get right up close to the screen and then all we can see are their eyes or their nose. So we just need to teach them about having some distance. And then just like that, kids in primary school at 5 years old are better equipped to make conference calls than all of you guys in the boardroom. We're not far off from having the iPad set up as little phone booths. So when the kids have done something really interesting that they want to share with their peers across the campus, they can go and make a phone call to let them know what they've done. When I was at school, to break down the 4 walls of the classroom, we attempted to have pen pals. We'd correspond maybe once or twice a year, and if we're being honest, it pretty much sucked. We're also part of a program called the Travelling Teddy. So this is where a real life Teddy travels the world and spends 2 weeks in each classroom he goes to. During his travels, he goes to America, Indonesia, Singapore, Saudi Arabia, Taiwan, and Australia. So when he arrives at our school, I think it'll be in about 10 days' time, he's going to be learning with the kids as they're learning. So the kids are going to have to research the country that he's going to next. They need to make sure that they dress him in the right clothing and pack the right clothing for the weather that he's going to. They also need to make sure that the gifts they send to the children that he's going to are right for them. It fits into their culture. It's also a chance for the children to research Australian history, culture and wildlife, so they can add a page to Teddy's passport. He has a passport with a page from every country he's going to. So they need to investigate a passport, see what needs to be included, how they can design a stamp, and then we'll make that for Teddy's passport. So this is the blog, and the children have already been following the blog, so they know exactly what Teddy's been learning, what he's been doing, and what they want to teach him. And over time, over the 2 weeks that he's in our class, they'll take photos and post videos and include that on the blog as well, so everyone else around the world can see what he's doing in Australia. So they saw already that he can write his name in English. He was taught that somewhere else. So now they want to teach him how to write his name in Hebrew, which is the second language that they're learning at school. It's a hands-on, practical way to learn about geography. It's a real use for atlas and world globes, but if we're being honest, we'll be using Google Maps. Even though the kids in my class are 5 and 6 years old, you'd be amazed by their presentation skills. Some of them could probably do a better job of today than I am. They're already making presentations to present to their peers, so they know how to find the app on the iPad, take a photo, embed the photo, add text and drawings, and then create it into a slideshow that they can share with their peers. They have no issue standing up in front of 30 children, 2 teachers, and presenting, or even presenting over FaceTime to the other campuses. They learn pretty quickly what needs to be included, how to make eye contact with the audience, and how to project their voice. And then the audience learns how to be an audience member. So we're going to have a look at an example now of Mia, in my class, who's 6 years old, presenting to the class about shapes.
We were learning about shapes, and I wanted to draw a circle, and it has one whole round curve. I found a circle, and in the corridor I found a picture of the circle. When I drew the rectangles and squares, we were taking photos, and I took a photo of rectangles.
So that's the kind of thing that the kids are doing, making their own presentations and presenting them. Another major change from when you and I were at school is the desire and the requirement to cater for children with different learning styles. So where once a literacy block would have one activity that the whole class completed, it's not unusual for us to now have a literacy block with 6 activities for the children to go through that cater for all different learning styles. So audio, visual, kinesthetic. When counting, we have a big chart up of all the numbers so that the visual learners can actually see each number as we count them. We also count out loud how many days we've been at school every day so that the auditory learners can hear the numbers. And then up on the tables we have all concrete materials so that those that are kinesthetic can touch and feel things as they're counting. We try to cater for different abilities because our students are just like your customers and they all understand things differently and respond in different ways. If we're looking at a literacy block, every day we read the same book to the children. So it's a time for the teacher to teach new skills and model the reading behaviours that they want the children to be learning. So once we've finished reading the book, the children need to complete a follow-up activity. So this might be as simple as making a mind map of the characters, and this is done using traditional pen and paper, but it's also done using mind mapping apps on the iPad. Or they could make a reenactment of the story by filming it and then making it into a movie by editing it in iMovie. They also read their books that they're taking home that night into an iPad. So they record themselves, email it home to their parents, and when they get home that night to do their book with their parents, they listen to their recording that they did at school during the day. So this gives them a chance to listen for mistakes they have made, point to the words as they're hearing them. It allows them to work on their expression and their intonation. We're going to hear now a quick example of one of the kids from my class reading into the iPad.
The shopping list. The shopping list. We went shopping. We got some fruit. We got some ice. We got some cake. We got some
We also have the kids practicing handwriting and making sure that they get their formation correct. So this is done by practicing handwriting in shaving cream, like you can see up there. They also get easels and paintbrushes and do it, big up on the board in front of them. But then they also use apps on the iPad, like this one called Dexteria. So this is Dexteria. It tells the children where to start the letter. It's got the arrow pointing which direction to go and the dots they have to pick up along the way. So it's an app that gives them instant feedback, and it frees me up to work with somebody else and not have to sit with the children and make sure that they've got the formation correct. It's there on the iPad for them. We've come to realise that one giant piece of communication just can't work for everybody. So at this point I need to stress that even though I work in a private school, the school's not unique and neither am I. We're not the only school who have an iPad program. Several years ago, many schools received funding as part of the Driving Education Revolution, and this money was to be spent on the technology or the infrastructure that was going to support the technology once it came into the school. So there are dozens of schools, both public and private, who have iPad programs in place, some of them catching up to where we are, and some of them even further along in their journey than where we are. When we began our journey, we went to look at Flemington Primary School. So this is a school that services a lot of government housing children. So we had a look at what they were doing. We saw what worked for them, what didn't work for them, and we brought some of those things back into our school. Just like any organisation, money is only one part of the equation. So despite the introduction of one-to-one iPad program in years 4 to 10 this year, we still managed to make sure our family saved $180 on their book lists and $500 from their school fees overall. The biggest difference between schools who have this and schools who don't is the overriding belief that technology is a critical factor for future success and is something that needs to be invested in. When I was at school and we were learning about technology, we'd have a computer lab. So we'd all have our 1 hour a week of technology or a computer lesson. And the whole class would traipse off to the lab and we'd get there and we'd all do exactly the same thing. So it might be logo writer with the little turtle who walked across the screen, or it could have been Excel and learning how to make formulas, and I still don't know how to make formulas. They weren't programs that were going to be brought back into the classroom or that were going to be integrated into our teaching and learning. They were just things that educators at the time believed that kids might use once they entered the workforce. And sure, Excel is great and it's used by lots of people, but the only thing that anyone who ever used logo writer will be able to tell you was that there was a little turtle who walked across the screen. Technology is not a subject anymore. It's the thread that holds and links all the other subjects together. And the good thing about this for children is that this is exactly what technology is doing at home and in the workplace. So when you're introducing an iPad program into a school, it's a massive process. It's not something that just happens. You have to make sure you have teachers on board as well as parents. So our program began back in 2011. 26 iPads were distributed across the 3 campuses. So for about 800 students, it was just the primary school, and as teachers we were told use them. We had no training, and it's pretty safe to say that the iPads were locked in the cupboard and came out maybe half a dozen times. What we needed was someone who's going to champion the initiative, and that someone was Erwin. He came in 2012 and he was our head of e-learning. It was once Erwin arrived that we could see the potential. We could see what was in front of us and how exciting and amazing it was. Erwin would come to all our planning sessions, show us apps that could be integrated into the curriculum and into what we were teaching and learning. Then he'd run sessions to teach us these apps so we knew how to use them. His job was to open the teachers' eyes to what was out there and to get those teachers that were scared of the technology to realise that it's actually nothing to be afraid of. With his guidance, we realised pretty quickly that we needed more iPads. 26 just wasn't going to be enough. From being locked in the cupboard, everyone was now fighting over when they were going to get the chance to use them. And by the end of that year, we'd managed to actually secure some more iPads for the school. At this stage, despite our huge enthusiasm and all our excitement, we were still very much at the beginning phase. So we were using what we call skill and drill apps. Basically, it's an app that has one use and it's pretty closed. So it might be an app specifically for addition or subtraction or handwriting. And while there's still a place for these apps, we saw that with Dexteria, our knowledge has grown. We now have a bank of apps that can be used right across the curriculum. So they can be used for literacy, for numeracy, and for second languages. So we have an example of one of these apps. It's called Puppet Pals. So this is an app that's used right across the curriculum. It's an app that the kids have a background. They choose the background and they put their character in and they get to move their character across the screen. So in my class, we've used this app for 3 different things. In numeracy, we've used it when we're teaching location words. So the kids move their character across the screen and say he's standing above the tree or behind the building. We've used it for their second language and for their Jewish studies when they retell the story of a festival they're learning about using these characters. And we've also used it for literacy, where the kids innovate on text and come up with new endings and make these stories on the iPad?
I am on top of the police car. I am on top of the racing car. I am between the tree and the bush. I'm between the two trees. Now I am on top of the fence. I am in front of the fence.
You don't need to see the rest of it. It goes on for ages. So you've now heard, I'm not sure what's happening, that's okay. So we've now heard what the 5 and 6 year olds can do in my class, but they're not alone. These changes aren't happening only in the primary school, they're happening right from kinder through to year 12. So we have the 3 year olds using iPad minis to take photos. We have 6 year olds making online presentations. We have 12 year olds reading their textbooks on iPads, and we have 17 year olds choosing which device they want to use and bringing that to school to use all day. Staff are also using iPads to change the way they're teaching. So a few years ago, if you looked at the way I took notes on kids, there were post-it notes all over in the classroom, in my office, on my desk, papers and books, and when it came time to write reports, I didn't know where anything was. Many staff now are using apps like Evernote, keeping all their notes on their kids in one place. So when it comes time to write reports, everything's right there. Or when you're passing things on to next year's teacher, it's as simple as just pressing a button. We're also emailing parents regularly so they can see what's happening in school and keep up to date with everything that their kids are doing. So as our knowledge and usage of the iPads has grown, so is the volume, and by the end of 2013 we had 188 iPads. At the start of this year, it was really exciting. We introduced a one-to-one iPad program from years 4 to 10. So that means one iPad for every child. So in 3 years, we went from 26 iPads to 1,150. We also opened up the network for those in year 11 and 12 to bring their own device. So they could decide what they want to use all day and they connect to our network. Mount Scopus, along with dozens of other schools across the state, are creating a wave of children who are confident, who aren't afraid to try new things, and who work out how to solve a problem if something goes wrong. While the children are still definitely taught skills of pen and paper, that's still important, kids today are tech-driven. They're the ones who suggest filming what they're doing so it reaches more people. As young as 8 years old, they're making iMovies and placing it on the school YouTube channel so it can be seen by kids at other campuses or seen by their parents at home. Imagine what this means for the business world in just a short few years. The children coming through today, your future customers, influencers and employers, are not like their predecessors. From the time they could talk, they've been encouraged to challenge, to explore, to question and to seek. They don't know a world without Google, without iPads, without answers. So they probably won't make very good clerics or factory workers, but I think we're going to be in pretty good hands. Thank you.